Okay, welcome everybody to uh, our webinar featuring Erica Holthausen on how to write for high visibility publications. We're very excited about this topic. This is probably the most people we've ever had registered for a webinar, which is a little bit surprising, but clearly it's a hot topic for people to learn how to get more visibility, because that's so important when we're employed. I'm Liz Stepley. A lot of you have not met me. We have a lot of guests today who aren't yet part of the PICA community. I'm one of the 3 solopreneurs or independent consultants who started PICA about 5 years ago. Well, we launched about a little over 5 years ago. PICA is an educational organization and community that teaches people how to launch and grow their own solopreneur business or independent consulting, executive coaching, financial planning, whatever. When you're self-employed as an individual and you don't have employees, it's all about you. That's what PICA does best, is help you overcome your fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and get all your ducks in a row. And how do you go forth and create the career of your dreams? But you didn't come here to learn about me or really about PICA. You came here to learn about Erica or learn from Erica and how to be in high visibility publications. So I have not opened my chat window, but thank you. I see that you guys, 23 of you have already written where you're from. And I'm currently sitting in Palm Desert. To get out of the snow, I usually in Reno. Saturday, I have to go back to the cold. Okay, so with that, let's cover a little bit of housekeeping items. I can't see my own screen, so hopefully you guys can. The important things to note is that we'd like to make this as interactive as possible, so Erica doesn't feel like she's talking to herself. So please stop and ask questions. You can either raise your virtual hand, you can put something in the chat, you can just interrupt. It doesn't matter, because a very relaxed organization, and the more interaction we have, the better. Also, please monitor your own background noise, because we had 70 people register for today, and it's impossible for me to keep track of everybody's muting and unmuting. So you have to do that on your own. You will definitely get these slides sent to you in the follow-up email and any other notes that Erica wants to share, and a link to the recording. So if you have to leave early or something, no problem. Okay, so with that, let me introduce Erica. So we're very pleased to have Erica join us today. She's the founder of Catchline Communications, and she equips consultants with the tools they need to develop a body of work that builds their authority, increases their visibility, and opens the door to new opportunities, which explains why this is such an important topic for us. Drawing on her experience as a freelance writer and editor, she guides her clients through selecting, pitching, writing, and publishing articles in industry trade journals such as Harvard Business Review, Inc., and Entrepreneur. So to learn more about how you can raise your profile by writing for publications, you should follow Erica on LinkedIn and register for her monthly Q&A newsletter called Pitched to Publish. You'll get that link in the follow-up email. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Erica.
Thank you so much. So go ahead to the next slide. We're talking about high visibility publications, right? But what in the world does that mean? For a lot of folks, the first thing that comes to mind are the big business publications like Inc. and Harvard Business Review or Entrepreneur. But those may or may not be high visibility publications depending on who you are trying to reach. So when we talk about that term, keep in mind trade journals, association publications, business magazines. That opens up the world much, much bigger. So next slide, please. So this is going to be about the Silva method, which is my proprietary 5-step methodology to help you with writing articles to build your authority. And there'll be one slide for each of these 5 steps. So after I go through the slide, and I promise I will not be reading the slides, but after I go through that, we can ask any questions that you have. Please chime in. So next slide, please. This first piece is selecting your publication. A lot of folks come with an idea of a publication in mind, but that publication may or may not actually help you achieve your business goals. So you want to really think about, okay, why is this of interest to me? Why do I want to be writing for a publication? And what am I hoping that I will get from it? You need to have a good business case for why you're going to do this, because if you don't already know, you will not be paid for your contributions for most publications. You also want to think about how is this going to fit in with all of the other marketing that you're doing? You are writing, you're probably already writing for your social media. You might have a blog. You're certainly writing reports for your clients. So how does this fit in? The good news here is that most publications, not all, but the lion's share, allow you to take the exact same article you wrote for them and publish it to your own blog or LinkedIn or Medium or Substack after a waiting period. So they want original content on their publication, but then most of the time you are free to publish it elsewhere. Finally, what are these publications that are going to actually resonate with your brand? We are judged by the company we keep, right? So if there's a publication that just makes you roll your eyes, for me, that's BuzzFeed, don't write for them. Make sure that the publication that you are thinking of and are writing for will actually resonate with you. Now, what are some of these goals that publications can help you with? Certainly building authority is one, and we'll talk more about that later. It can be attracting clients. It could be that you want to interview folks, other professionals in your area because you want to build those relationships. It might be that you are trying to promote your book or a webinar, or you're trying to secure more speaking engagements. The more you know about what your business goals are, the easier it is to identify the publication that will help. So a quick example here is, let's say one of the things that you want to do is you want to interview other experts in your field because you're trying to build those partnerships. Entrepreneur will not let you do that. Inc. will. So these goals allow you to create a filter so you can choose the publication that's actually going to help you. All right. Any questions on the select your publication piece? And we don't have to go in order, by the way. So if you have something that comes up later, you can chime in.
That is, yeah. And then maybe just a few specifics on some of the meetings. So
we have somebody with a background on. We're hearing your phone call.
I wasn't sure.
Shannon, I think you had your hand up.
I did, but I think that this is also the background. So I'll type in my question. Thank you.
All right, feel free to pop it into the chat as well, and we can come back to it. All right, next piece. Illuminate your body of work. So this is basically to avoid creating random acts of content. Everything that you put out there, you want it to be driving towards that reputation that you are trying to build. So you want it to be very clear about, okay, what is the reputation that I'm trying to build here? What do I want to be known for? Your body of work, I use an analogy of a forest. And this came about several years ago. I was walking through one of the state forests here in Connecticut. I have some of my best ideas when I'm tromping about outside, and started thinking, well, what makes a forest a forest? Why is a forest different from the woods, for example? Got home and started doing some research on it. And a forest, like a body of work, is a cohesive system. So it's defined by the overarching canopy, and it has to be a certain denseness for it to be a forest and a certain size. The canopy is created by what are called the mother trees. And in the forest, the mother trees are the oldest and largest trees in the forest. And then you have all of the smaller trees and shrubs that are closer to the forest floor. And underneath, the other connector is the mycorrhizal network, and it connects all of the trees and shrubs to one another. So the way that relates to your body of work is this. The reputation you are trying to build, the thing that you want to be known for, that's the big canopy. That's the thing that is overarching everything else that you do. The mother trees are your themes. That's what creates that canopy. The smaller trees and shrubs, those are your topics, and those fall under those different themes. And this is where I get to call you a bunch of fungus. The mycorrhizal network is you. That's your experience-based expertise, and that's what ties the whole thing together. So the more you can define what your body of work is and what it is that you want to be, what you want to stand for, the better. A great place to start, and there's a link to this at the end, is by inventorying all your existing stuff. So whether you have a newsletter, a blog, whether you're writing for social media, if you inventory it all, you can start to see what are some of the common themes that I am talking about regularly here. The biggest thing about a body of work is, especially if you're writing for publications, is you have to have a strong perspective. You have to have a point of view. Publications are looking for you to add to the conversation. There's a lot of noise out there. So a couple of ways that you can add to that conversation and figure out what your point of view is. My favorite is going on a rant or a rave. Is there something about your industry that just makes you absolutely banana pants? If so, write about it, because that's a great way to tap into what makes your perspective a little bit different. Also, when you are reading or listening to something, three great questions. The first is yes and. So if I come across something and I'm like, interesting. If there's a yes and, what comes after that and is part of your perspective. The next is yes, but, which is basically saying, yeah, but you're missing a whole piece. So again, that's adding some more nuance. And the other is no, because. So those can help you kind of develop your perspective and what that looks like. In the links to this at the end, there's an IP inventory, so you can track all of the things that you've already done. That can be overwhelming if you've been doing this for a minute. So start with maybe 3 months of content, and then you can add to it as you go. And there's also a link to an editorial calendar. I am one of those people who, there's some folks in this world, and I love them to pieces, I am not them, who can plan out everything that they're going to write over the course of the year. My inner toddler, as soon as I am told what to do, digs her heels in and says no. So you'll see 2 tabs on the editorial calendar. One is stuff that you have already written or that you know you are going to write. The other is the idea tab. And that way I throw all these ideas in, and if my toddler is having a, hissy fit, we don't have to do the one I planned. We can look through and see which one is exciting. So,
Erica, we did have a question going back, I think, to the S part of your model.
yeah.
Shana wants to know, how do you find out what each publication allows or wants regarding that?
Great question. I wish that there was an easy answer, and I wish I could say every publication has contributor guidelines. Sadly, they don't. They all should. They all should, but they don't. So a couple of ways to figure that out. First is, if you have an idea of a couple of different publications, do search for contributor guidelines. If you put that in quotes, along with the name of the publication in quotes in Google or on their site, that'll bring anything up if they have it. If they don't have it, you need to be really familiar with what the publication is and see what they're doing. Then you're going to look for, see what they write about, how they like to write it. If they've already had a bunch of different articles about your area of expertise, take a look at those and see where the gap is so that you can fill the gap. And then you will probably be doing a more traditional pitch to the publication. So you'll search on their website for, sometimes it's their content editor, sometimes it's their web editor, for the person who is the right person to reach out to. If you know anybody who writes for the publication, they might be able to make a connection for you. And in fact, that's pretty much, they don't say that this is true, but it is pretty much the only way to write for Harvard Business Review, is if you have somebody else make an introduction for you.
Interesting. Any other
So.
any other questions? Anybody raising their hands want to come up and haven't seen anything. Should we go
All
forward,
right,
Erica?
next piece. So writing, how many folks in this room have a tendency to edit as they write? I'm like, I know I'm not the only person. One of the easiest ways to become a better and faster writer is to break that habit, and it is so hard to do. So when you're thinking about writing an article, there are actually 4 steps to it. The first is the thinking step. This might be where you're either doing research or you're mulling an idea in your head. What I also have all of my clients do is I have them put together what I call a SOAR analysis. So you ask yourself, okay, who does this article serve? What is the objective of this article? In other words, why should this specific audience read it? What action will they be able to take after reading your article? In other words, how will this piece change their thinking, their mindset, or their behavior? And will this article enhance or diminish your reputation? That's the big overall filter question, which is basically, should you even be writing this thing? Then I have folks do a very simple outline, and this does not need to be detailed. Mine are usually bullet points and oftentimes on the back of a scrap piece of paper. In your introduction, that's where you are setting the context and you are giving your reader any context that they need to be able to understand the other piece. Most of the time you will be writing for online publications. So they really like subheads and white space and bullet points. I come from the print publication world. It took me a really long time to embrace bullet points because I think they're ugly. They are very helpful for your reader. If you keep your reader in mind, your reader is busy. They're doing 10 different things at once. They need to be able to skim through your article because they might get halfway through and then the phone rings, or they realize, oh my gosh, I have a meeting in 5 minutes, or any number of other things happen. So the more you can make it skimmable, the better. So once you have this sort of thinking piece down, then you go into writing. And this is the shitty first draft. So for those of us of a certain age, if you remember those blue books that we had in college exams, imagine it a blue book with a college exam. Somehow in an hour, we were able to answer 5 essay questions and we did well. Channel that thing. So the more time you give yourself to write a piece, the more time it will take. It's that whole Parkinson's law idea. So that first piece of writing is just get all of the ideas down on the page as quickly as you can. Really embrace the shitty first draft. Write fast and furious. If there's something that you remember, don't be looking at your notes. If there's something you remember but you can't think of it, I do brackets and I'm like, look up that guy who went across the country, and I think he might have been a beat poet. And I'll know what I'm thinking of, but nobody else would. So, so you can do that, and that's getting that first draft done. Next comes, and in the writing world, we also often talk about this as write the first draft with the door closed. It's just you, your ideas, you're getting the pieces down on paper. The rewrite is when you open the door and you invite your audience in. This is when you're going to look at your research. This is when you're going to really think about, okay, who is this piece for? You're going to refine it. You're going to add the ideas that need to be in there that maybe didn't get in there with your quick and dirty first draft. And then the final piece of this is editing. So once you've done that rewriting, then you do the editing. And there are actually 2 stages to the editing process. There's the developmental edit, which is all about the organization of the article. Does it flow? Will the reader understand? Can they follow it well? Is it logical? And then there's the edit we always think about, which is the grammar right? Are the commas where they're supposed to be? Did I spell all the things correctly? Writing, one of the things I often say is writing is not about the ink, it's about the think. The think is usually not about your area of expertise because you know that stuff. The think is about how am I going to structure this so I can convey it to the reader so that they really, really understand what I'm talking about here. So there are links to the SOAR analysis. So if you didn't catch everything I said there, there's a link to it at the end, and an article that I wrote about how to structure an article for publication. So questions about this part? I could talk about this until I'm dead. So any questions about the writing piece?
I don't know if this is the right time to talk about this, but at some point, are you going to talk about AI?
We can talk about that right now.
Okay.
So I would be quite happy to never have to talk about AI, but AI is here. It's not going anywhere. You can either use it well or you can use it poorly. The vast majority of people are not using it intelligently. They are outsourcing their thinking to a robot. And what I've heard is, but AI knows everything. AI does not know everything. AI does not know your experience, doesn't know anything that you have in your head and heart. And that's what you want to tap into. So, how do we use AI intelligently? Because there are ways to use it that are very helpful without outsourcing. I always say, don't outsource your thinking or your relationships to a robot, because, like, what's the point? If that's what our world is going to be, cue the Mack truck, because I'm ready to go. So a couple of ways to use AI that can be really helpful. You do the thinking first, but then you can ask AI to take a look at what you've written and figure out, where are the holes? What am I missing? What might somebody criticize here? That can help you see it from a slightly different perspective. It can also be very good at helping you come up with a title, because it's a robot talking to a robot. So if you say, here's this thing that I've written, can you give me, and ask it for multiple titles. Can you give me 15 titles and see what it does? And sometimes you'll get one that just really works. And other times you'll be like, oh, if I take part of this or part of this, or it might be some more inspiration. But either way, my biggest thing about AI is making sure that you do the thinking first and you capture your own ideas and own beliefs first. And then you can use AI as something to subsidize. One of the very backwards benefits, this is Erica's curmudgeonly side coming out. One of the big benefits of AI is a lot of people are not going to use it well. They are going to be lazy. They're going to put out a lot of garbage that all sounds exactly alike. You can already start to see some of the AI generated images. They look alike because they're all coming from the same place. So there's going to be more noise. The easier, that's going to actually make it easier to stand out, because yours won't be noise. It won't be saying the same thing that everybody and their brother is saying. So happy to talk more about AI, but that's something to keep in mind. The other piece is, most publications will not allow you, this is more and more common, most publications will not allow you to submit articles to them that were created with AI. So because they are looking for original content, and AI by definition, it's sort of kind of original, but it's basically just using an algorithm to figure out what is most likely the next word in this sentence. So this is also true of companies, by the way. More and more are putting in their contracts, like, you cannot submit something to us that was created with AI. You can use AI as an assistant, but if it is the primary source, that's getting sticky.
Erica, Mark raised his hand.
Mark.
Thank you for your disdain as a writer and editor for AI.
Happy to oblige.
My question has to do with my own copyrighted material. And if that material is partially from a copyrighted book of mine, can that content be considered original for the primary publication that you mentioned?
The time, no. 2 times where that is not true. One is you can take that concept that you've already got published in your book, and if you change the way you're talking about it and basically rewrite it as an article specifically for the audience of the publication you have in mind, so maybe also throwing in a couple of examples that are specific to that publication, then it's original content. The idea is not original, but very few ideas are, but the content is original, and it can also, so you can definitely use that as source material. The other place where that is not true is there are a small number of publications that allow what's called syndicated content that has already been published elsewhere. And those, a lot of associations, for example, are perfectly happy to take content that has been published elsewhere, because it's, as long as it serves their membership and their readers, that's something that a lot of them take. So if they accept syndicated content, then it can be word for word. Sometimes they ask if you to, change the title or something along those lines, or if you take the idea and customize it to a specific audience. That's another way to sort of get around that statement. On that same note, every publication has a very specific audience that they're talking to. So you might be talking to a larger audience, but if they are only talking to this segment, that's what the article should be geared towards. So a good example of this is a client of mine who writes for Inc. She's a communications specialist, interpersonal communication skills. So she wanted to write an article about how to ask for a raise and get it. Inc. has no interest in that because they speak directly to C-suite executives. So she wrote 2 articles. One was how to say no to somebody who asks for a raise even when they deserve it. That was published on Inc. And then how to ask for a raise, how to ask for and get the raise you deserve. And that was published on Savvy. So you can take that one idea and approach it from 2 different angles. And that can also, that's another way to go.
Thank you.
So, Patty.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. Just a quick question. Do you have any thoughts on the right size or word count for articles, or does it really depend on the publication?
It really depends on the publication, but here's a good sort of rule of thumb. Typically between about 750 and 1,250 words. If a publication, so if they don't have any guidelines, and a shocking number of publications don't bother giving guidelines because, I don't know, they like to shoot themselves in the foot, 750 to 1,250 is a good place to head for. You don't want it to be too long because, you can also literally go through and get, do a word count of some of the articles that they've published. That would also give you a good idea. Typically, if they are into longer form than that, they make it clear. Most will say we don't want it fewer than 500 or 600 because it's SEO. So that actually brings up a great reason about this is why we get to do this now. Publications have always relied very heavily on advertising revenue. When advertising revenue mostly moved online, that is all geared by website traffic, which is driven by search engine optimization, which is driven by original high quality content. A lot of these publications could not possibly pay their staff writers and freelancers to create all the content they need. So they have a huge need for more content. If you come in and then fulfill that need, that also gets you the access to their already defined audience. And it's a little bit of an imprimatur of the organization because they're basically saying, okay, we vetted Patty and we think that she has stuff that's actually worth all y'all listening to. So that gives the added credibility and authority.
Appreciate that.
So, other questions about the writing piece?
I have a question, Erica. When I first started blogging 7 years ago, one of the things that really made it easier for me was having a good editor, because I knew that I could just barf out whatever the content was and that he was going to fix it and make it sound great. How do you recommend that people find a good freelance editor?
So I have about 10,000 thoughts of this all at once. So thought one, the editor at the publication is not going to do that much work. So it has to be in good shape when it gets to the publication. Otherwise, they will either publish it as is, which you might not be thrilled with, or they won't publish it at all. So finding a freelance editor, a couple of different things. First, I always recommend if you have a colleague who is also doing this and you can be each other's second set of eyes, do that. That can be really helpful. ACES is the Society for Editing. They have a list of hundreds of freelance editors. Editors, like everybody else, you've got great ones and you've got mediocre ones. So one of the things that you want to look for are editors who specialize, like I am an editor for magazine articles. I am not a book editor. They're two very, very different animals. So if a client of mine asks me to edit the book, it's like, nope, you want a book editor because that's just a different animal. So you want folks who are familiar with editing articles. The other piece is making sure that you have edited your own work as well as you can. And oftentimes that means take a break. Like before you come back to fully do the editing, get some fresh eyes. Go for a walk. If you can let it sit overnight, do so. Reading it out loud is another great way to find those things that you're like, I thought that was clear, but that was terrible. So those are a couple of ways that you can find a freelance editor who can help you with this stuff.
Thank you. And Matt Fitzgerald just put the link to ACES editors org in the chat. We'll include it in the notes too.
Great. Next slide, please. So this is the validate your ideas because I needed a V to make Silva work. And what this really is when you write for a third-party publication, because they have vetted you, they are also they are validating your ideas. So we talked about this a little bit earlier when you're picking out your publication. You really want to know the publication well before you pitch them. If you are doing some publications, you are Forbes and Fast Company, for example. Forbes, you essentially need to be a member of one of their councils to be able to write for them. Fast Company, it's their executive board. Those are both pay to play, which is a trend in the industry. So that's how you get to write for them. It's generally not a pitch. Some publications have an application form. Many have a pitch. So you want to really be acquainted with the publication. You want to have really thought through your concept of what it is that you are pitching. You want to show them how you are adding to the conversation that they are already having and how you are bringing in some nuance, a different perspective. Different perspectives for editors are like catnip. So because we don't want to be writing this, we don't want to have all of the same stuff all of the time. We want there to be like, ooh, I disagree. Cool. Like, yes. That's something that editors get very excited about. So in the links, there is a link to an article about how to pitch your publication. That's general information. Ignore anything and everything I say if the publication has guidelines and they say something different than I do. Go with their guidelines first.
Corby?
Was there a question? I heard somebody. So that's some of this piece with the pitch and really making sure that you are following what they're saying. I also recommend take a look at their homepage. And oftentimes I will recommend my clients create what is called a swipe file. It's just a document with a bunch of examples. What are the headlines that really resonated with you from their homepage? Because that will help you figure out how to craft a headline that this publication will like. At the end of the day, your editor has the ultimate decision-making power over the headline. So they may change it, but they do expect to have a good headline to start with. And that also brings up, can you fight with your editor? Oh, yes, you can. So if your editor is asking you a question, they actually do want to know what you think. So I'm now talking about editors at these publications. It is absolutely okay to have a give and take. If they change the title to something that you're like, yeah, that changes the meaning of this, bring it up with them. If they've made some changes, if you have not been edited a lot, it can be jarring to get your article back with a whole lot of things. And you're like, oh my God. The first thing I ever had edited by the publication I wrote 4 years ago, literally covered in red ink. Like you could not see what I wrote for all of the ink. And I wanted to crawl under the table and die because I thought it must be the worst thing in the world. And she saw my face and said, well, this is a really good article. I was like, are you kidding me? So sit with it a little bit and see if you can try to understand what it is that the editor is trying to do there. Oftentimes what they are doing, the changes that they are making are to make it more clear and compelling to the reader. Title changes are often SEO related, but if they miss the mark and it's like, okay, title change to SEO, but really changes the tone of this piece, talk to them. Because at the end of the day, your name is on that piece, not theirs. So any questions about the pitch process or working with editors?
I have a question. How do you find the email or the way to actually get the pitch to the magazine?
Yeah, great question. So more and more have an online submission process. Similar to like building on that note, more and more, you don't actually get an individual editor. You are put into the bucket for the editorial team to look at. So if there is an application process, and many do have that, you basically go with the application process. If you have a friend who writes for that publication or a colleague, and they are willing to make an introduction for you, let them do that, because that always means that at least you will be looked at. It does not mean that you will definitely get it. Editors get a huge number of introductions. You know, I want to introduce you to my friend so-and-so. They are the most brilliant person on the face of the planet. And then it's like, okay, but they cannot write their way out of a paper bag, and they are going to be more work than they are worth. So it will get you looked at to have that introduction. Oftentimes on the publication's website, you can find a list of staff members, and sometimes it has their email address there. The Google is also your friend, as is taking a good guess. If you know the email address of this person and it's lstebley@pica.org, then chances are I would be eholthausen@pica.org. So you can also do that. And I think there's a website that actually helps you find those email addresses. So
yeah, it's called Hunter.io or something, helps you find email addresses.
yeah, more and more often it's through an application these days or an online form. So Matt.
Yeah, thanks. When I've been doing like sort of media communications work, not trying to pitch myself, but I've often found that there's like advertiser sections of websites where they describe like, you know, their audience metrics, their positioning in the marketplace, like all the things that kind of give you a shortcut to how they see themselves and how they want to grow. Have you found that to be like a useful source of information for people who are trying to approach publications about getting pieces published?
I did not pay Matt to be here. Yes. So media kits. Oftentimes, if you look for a publication's media kit, it will tell you exactly what Matt was talking about. Who who their audience is and who they think their audience is not always perfectly aligned, but you'll see, okay, this is who reads our publication. This is who we are talking to. You know, it's executives at the C-suite level, and they make X number of dollars. They're in this industry there. So that can give you a lot of good information to make sure that where you are pitching is actually going to get stuff in front of the people you want it to get in front of. So media kits are a very valuable resource when you're in that first research phase and looking at different publications. So thank you,
And where
Matt.
would you find those?
Typically, if you just search in quotes like media kit in quotes and then the name of the publication, you can find it that way. On the publication's website, it's typically in the footer, there'll be a part that's advertising. If you click there, that'll be another place where you can often find the media kit. Not every publication has them, but those that do will typically have it there. So, all right, next slide. So this last piece, accelerate your authority. One of the things that I am often talking to folks about is just because you write an amazing article for Harvard Business Review and you hear a lot of and you feel great about it and it gets out there and Harvard Business Review promotes it, does not mean that the hordes of humans are going to come knocking down your door. What you are creating with each of these articles is an asset that you can use to build your authority. And building your authority is a long game. This is not something, are there great stories where somebody publishes something and then they land $100,000 client? Yep. That's not what you should expect though, because that's extremely, extremely rare. What is more common is, okay, you get something and you've published this piece. Now you want to really use it. So you do want to promote it. You want to think about who you can send it to directly to let them know that this piece was published. And that might be people whose thinking really helped shape your own in that article. Anybody who you had a conversation about the topic that you're addressing in the article who might find value from it. Great folks who have just helped you along the way, who might generously celebrate it with you. You also want to think about how can you repurpose it. Repurposing and promoting this thing, don't just do it once. A lot of folks will write an article and they'll be like, I have my latest article from Inc. and you never see it again. As long as that piece is relevant and still accurate, pimp that puppy out, because it is still an asset and it can still be used. So a couple of different ways to do this include, sending it out directly, promoting it to individuals and in your social media, syndicating your content, which is that whole idea of taking that exact same article and publishing it elsewhere after whatever waiting period is required, and repurposing. Repurposing becomes even more important if there is a paywall to the article and not everybody can actually get to it. So there's a link in the next slide that has a whole bunch of stuff about a workflow for syndicating your published articles. So that brings a published article together with your content marketing efforts that you already have in place. And there's one that's how to increase the ROI in writing articles for high visibility publications. And that gives a bunch of ideas for repurposing. One of the things that can happen here, especially if, again, publications really like you to have an opinion. They want a strong point of view and a strong perspective. That can rock some boats. And if and when it does, first, if it does, high five, because it takes courage to put yourself out there and be like, I'm calling bullshit on this aspect of my industry. But also, you don't have to respond to everybody. Engage with people who engage with your article if they are engaging responsibly, if they are being respectful. Folks who are disrespectful in their comments about your article, you have absolutely zero obligation to engage with those folks. And this happens a lot. If you are working in like the DEI space, this happens a lot. So keep that in mind as well. The last piece with this is, as you think about doing this, if you decide, okay, yes, I do want to write articles for publications, know also that you will be pitched. So one of my clients writes for Inc. because she has interviewed a few folks. She now gets pitches from PR folks who want her to interview their clients for her column. So she had to put in place, like, what are the things that I will entertain and what are the things that I will absolutely not entertain? Like, how do I make these decisions? So that she had that in place for going forward to be able to say, nope, this doesn't fit the criteria. Yes, this does. Here's the next step for that. And also put a system in place, because folks will start to say, hey, Jim, would you introduce me to your editor at Harvard Business Review? And it's one thing when somebody asks for that kind of an introduction who you know well. It's another thing when Joe Schmo, who you've never heard of ever in the history of your life, gets in touch with you and asks that, because that happens as well. So put some systems in place early so you have an idea of how you want to respond. So,
Erica, we had a question come in the chat. Mark asked, could you recommend a book or an article about the process of converting a published work to an actual consulting gig?
Yes. Okay. So the easy answer is, in this next slide, you will see a link to a case study that I wrote about one of my clients. And he did this, and he did it very, very effectively. The big thing there is knowing, you'll see sort of how he approached it, because he is in the environmental health and safety management world, and small boutique firm that was often competing with the big kids. And they would often be brought in to implement a plan that was created, but then they were like, okay, but if I implement this now, 6 months down the road, this different regulation is coming, and we're going to have to redo the whole bloody thing. So they started to really write about their area of expertise in the regulation and knowing what was coming down the pike in specific countries that they did a lot of work in. And they shared certain things with larger consulting firms, because they were like, hey, we will make you look good. So bring us in, then you don't have to be like, oh, shoot, like we did this whole thing and they spent thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars with us, and now we have to redo it. And he also wrote articles that went specifically to the EHS folks at different companies. So again, a lot of it is how you share it. On that similar note, one of the things that makes writing for associations really helpful is these folks have been burned a million times, because they have been told, like, oh, we'll write something for you. And then it's basically just buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, because because that happens. So they've been burned with things like that. If you start writing for them and are providing real value for their members regularly, when they have a conference coming up, you're already top of mind because you've already been providing value. Associations these folks are generally overworked and underpaid if they even have a staff. So being able to be an asset to the association by being an asset to their members who are your prospective clients just does a whole lot of good things if part of what your goal is to do more speaking engagements and to reach that audience in different ways. So not sure if that answered the question well. That was like, here's what I say, so look at what I already wrote. I don't know of, Dory Clark writes a lot about how to do this and how to build authority. I think her book is called Stand Out. She writes about a bunch of other things as well in that. And she looks also, she kind of widens the lens. I know a whole lot about very little. It's like, this is what I know, is what I'm sharing with you today. She also knows the social media angle. How do you turn it into a book? How do you turn this into speaking engagements and that kind of thing? So
Thank you.
Questions?
Rich includes in the comments here, which just scrolled out of my view. One moment. Scroll back up. Many associations do not have staff. They leverage an association management company like, and they list a few of them there. So,
Yeah.
but yes,
Yeah.
you know, PICA is like an association in that, you know, we kind of a labor of love, and it's a community. And everybody, and I know that Rich is here from SPC too. We're all underworked, overworked and underpaid, and always
Yes.
looking for content and fresh ideas. Matt writes, the Business of Authority podcast is good as well, has a broader focus, not specific to writing.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, great addition. Yeah, there are more and more folks talking about authority, and how you build it. There's also all the folks who talk about thought leadership. I'm curmudgeonly about that phrase, but those folks also offer a lot of valuable information, even if I don't like the phrase.
Erica, tell us a little bit more. I can't remember if there's one more slide after this or not, but tell us a little bit more about how to work with you.
So a couple of different ways. So first, every single month I do pitch to published. It's a free mini training and Q&A. It's on the second Wednesday of the month. So I always have a little bit of like a mini training on a specific topic, and then I open the floor. So anybody who has questions, I do my best to answer them. I do not believe in secret sauce. And as you've experienced today, I'm a very opinionated human. So, and if I don't know the answer, I will likely know where to find the answer. In terms of working with me in a paid way, Pathway to Publication is my signature program. It is a 6-month program. The first 3 are intensive. We meet every single week. I keep the group very small, no more than 10 people. We meet every week to do basically learn, do, and discuss. And we have work parties built in because I'm sure I'm not alone in saying I have bought things that were learning things, and I learned all the things and I had a great time and I implemented absolutely nothing. So we build the implementation right into that program. So first 3 months, very intensive. Second 3 months, we have a combination of 2 workshops that we do. One is called an inspired writing workshop. The other is an interactive editing workshop. So every month you are writing and editing an article that is ready to go. And also in those second 3 months, it's each of the folks in the program and I have a one-to-one meeting for each of those 3 months. So it can be talking about strategy, it can be talking about next steps, it can review the pitch, like whatever is top of mind there. And then I have workshops. So if you're like, okay, but I'm really good at this, this, and this, but these 2 areas are tricky, I have one-off workshops that are that I run on a fairly regular basis. I think it's about every 2 months. So that's a 3-hour workshop about one of these 5 different areas. So, and all of that information is on my website, and I publish all of my pricing. So, which I know is like, you shouldn't do that as a consultant, but I do because I like to.
And I appreciate that too. I hate it when I read through all this stuff and I'm really interested, and then it says sign up to get more information. You have no idea if it's in the ballpark or not.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you
and
for all this.
given who I work with, it makes much more sense because we're all dealing with cash flow issues and what's reasonable and what's not, and so that's part of it. And I do have a few one-on-one clients. I limit that to 5 at one time, so I only have a space available at the moment, but that's another way that I work with a few people. I always recommend Pathway to Publication first because it gives you such a solid foundation, and then you may or may not need to work with me one-on-one. So
Thank you, Erica. This was super helpful. I have been writing for some publications for a while, and I've learned a lot just last 45 minutes with you. So we had a lot of guests here today who aren't familiar with PICA, so this is my chance to also plug PICA. So where Erica focuses on building your brand awareness through writing for publications, PICA is more about teaching you how to be a successful business owner, how to set up and run your own business, how to get paid what you're worth, how to keep more of what you're paid. we do one-off workshops. We do run a boot camp 3 times a year. But basically, the thing that makes PICA special is its community, where PICA members get to know each other and help each other out. So for those of you who are new to PICA and what we are, check us out. And with that, I think we will call that a wrap. So thank you, everybody. And we'll send the notes out within the next couple of days with all of the links to everything that Erica mentioned. And I even jotted down a couple other notes of things to include. So thanks again, and we'll see you at the next event.
Thanks so much.